So, sweeps. Let's see. I'm going to first introduce sweeps before going into this exact tutorial. Just on a very basic steps. Essentially, a sweep is you have a profile. So in this example, the profile is round. And you have a path for this to follow. And now we're going to have a nice bass beat in the back of this video. So on a very simple note, you have a circle or a profile and you tell it to follow a path. So if I select both of these things and go to my feature tree and click on swept boss base, you can see the circle follows this path. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's how you might use a sweep. In this instance, we're going to use that to build a handle. So looking at the demo tutorial, to start off, I'm going to have you all build this sketch. I'm not going to give it to you because based on some of the feedback last time, I think it's important to go through the steps of learning how to define an arc. So some nuances on this. When it's created, there's one line here. There's a second line here. This vertex in the middle is important. It gives us this line being horizontal to it and on a midpoint to it. So that's what centers the handle about the origin. Here I have this dimension, which is kind of an odd dimension, but it exists for a purpose. This will eventually be a handle. This is the gap between the back of the handle and the door that it's going to sit on. So 1 1/4 inch, honestly, is actually kind of a bit of a tight gap for a handle. You probably want something a bit more than that, but anyway, this dimension is telling you how big to make that gap. So in that thought of building a Jenga tower, planning for things that may need to change, this is kind of a key dimension in how the handle functions. You might get feedback saying, hey, we need to get more room back there for fingers to fit. You can then simply, change this dimension to whatever it ends up needing to be. What else? We have the width of the handle, and then we have kind of a arc up here. So basically, you need to create the sketch. It's the master sketch. The next sketch that we're making is, and that'll be the profile. The next sketch that you're going to have to make is the path that this will follow. So here we're making a horizontal line, and then an arc that's tangent to that line, and that's going to the center of the profile. And that arcs down and meets at the bottom here. So the way that this file is set up is such that the top plane represents kind of the base that the handle sits on. The right plane has the profile, and the front plane has the path that this will follow. So very simply, when we start, once you have the master sketch constructed, you'll take a new sketch on the right plane, take the profile and convert entities to copy it. If you set up your construction lines properly, it will only get the lines you need. You can exit out of that. Same thing for the front plane. Make a new sketch on that, hitting Alt-S, select sketch 2 for the path, and then convert entities. So here's something new that we haven't talked about yet, and it'll make sense in a minute, but the tutorial asks you to click this point and drag it. So this arc is still based on the original, but now it just goes a little bit further. The reason for that you'll see, I'll explain it later after the sweep, it'll make more sense, but it's to cut the handle so that it has it meets the door flush. Again, the door sits on this line here. So now with both of these copied sketches, we're now ready to make our sweep. I believe the tutorial asks you to first click on the swept boss base icon, and then it brings up this property manager on the left. Now, once again, anything highlighted in blue is kind of SolidWorks asking you for that information. So here, instead of words, it has icons. Just like that first thing I showed you, it gives us a circle, which is asking you what the profile is. In this instance, it might be tempting to just click here, but if you do, there's a chance you're going to select the master sketch. So if you want to be particular, it's always better to expand the tree here and go ahead and click on sketch 3 as your profile. You'll notice the blue jumps. It's now asking us for the path. We're going to go ahead and click on sketch 4. And now it ghosts in what we're going to see. For now, you can ignore these other things. The only thing that's going to be important that's not here at the moment is the merge result if you have another body. And once again, thinking about pieces of clay, if you want to attach them or keep them separate, that's what that merge result is. It's not here at the moment. It's not an option because there's only one body in this, or there's no bodies technically right now. So when you're done, you go ahead and click on the check mark. And now we have the swept profile off to the left. Next up is a new tool. It's a surface tool, but it's probably the surface tool I use the most. And this is what I mentioned. This is why we extended this longer than it needs to be. We're going to use this top plane to cut the handle. And again, the top plane represents the door the handle will sit on. So I select the top plane, or I forget the order which it has you do. But anyway, you have to go over to the Surfaces tab in the Command Manager. It's a little bit different, a different kind of SOLIDWORKS world. And you're looking for Cut with Surface. It's about in the middle here. It has like a gray box on top with an orange center. I'm going to click off the top plane. I'm going to click on this. So very simple tool. It's asking you, hey, what surface do you want to cut with? In this case, I'm using the top plane to cut. This arrow tells you where the material will be removed. So if for some reason the arrow is pointing up, you'll delete the wrong side of your handle. We want it to delete going down. We click the check mark, and now we've cut that extra material away. Just to illustrate why we drag this longer, if I did not drag this point further and we left it here, you'll notice there's going to be this weird little cut up here. This is, again, where master sketches are nice because they can be accurate and constrained, but then when you copy the sketch, you can do things like this to like drag it slightly further than it needs to be. Now, of course, you may have already noticed that we're building half of the model, or half of the handle. The next step is to mirror it, which I think is also a new command for everybody. So the mirror is in the Features tab of the Command Manager. It's right here. You click on it. So once again, the blue is what is asking you for information. It's saying, hey, what do you want this to mirror about? I would say it's best practice to choose the right plane, but if you're feeling lazy, you can always click on the face. Again, the reason why it's best practice to use the right plane is thinking about the Jenga tower and day one, where you all made structures like shelves to hold the pieces. The right plane is a better shelf than the front face, because the right plane will always exist. This front face may not always exist. Now here, it always defaults to what features do you want to mirror. It's always more robust when you have the option to mirror a body to do so. Part of the challenge here of mirroring the feature is like, if you mirror the sweep, it may not mirror the cut. If you mirror both, you might get errors. So always better to mirror bodies. So you want to click on this. Again, it's prompting us for the body. Simply in the viewing window, you can just click on that. It should hint at what it looks like. Some of the options down here, you can almost always leave it to default. Merge results, which we want the two clay bodies to be together. In some instances, you may not want that. That's why you would uncheck this. You can kind of ignore the others for now. And there you have it. We have a very simple arced handle with a profile. The last step is to apply a fillet to this, to the sides, just to make that handle a little bit smoother. The kind of shorter arc top is purely a design choice, just to make the handle feel a little bit smaller. The bigger arc on the bottom is for comfort. In my head, it makes more sense to have a smoother, more filled arc on the back to kind of fit in your fingers. Very simple tutorial to start us off. I guess in my opinion, maybe not. But essentially, this is what you will all be building towards. Are there any questions on any of this, Max? Yes. It moves. Okay, so the question is, if you mirror something about a plane and then move the something, what happens to the mirror? Well, okay, just a second. If you move it away from the plane? Correct. Yes. It would intersect. I can show you all what that means. Anastasia, your question was, did I merge it? I merged, okay, so one question is, did I merge it? The answer is yes, I merged it right here. Merge solids. Okay, let's try this. What was it? Windows Plus? Right here, merge solids. That's where it got merged. Can I get out of this now? Okay, cool, that works. Nice, appreciate the tip. Okay, the question is what happens if you move it before the mirror? So I'm going to move my roll bar up here. This is also kind of a new command for everybody. Oh, it's not even up here. Anytime you want a new command, it's under Tools, Customize, Commands. It's so convoluted. And then Features is where at least these feature tabs are. This will be a handy one. I'll have you all do this at some point. It's called Move Copy Bodies. And simply when you find it, you can drag it up and leave it up here. So if I click on this Move Body command, I can select this. First, the question was what happens when you move it away. And now if I drag this down to the mirror, actually gives me an error because it's trying to merge them. So if I uncheck Merge Results here, now it will mirror it. Does that answer your question, Max?
Yeah. So, but like, what if you, is there a way that you actually do interesting you have to move it over that?
And you want it to move with it? In that instance, okay, let's say you may have to move. I'll be honest, I can't think of an instance when you'd want to do that because you would probably want to move it after you complete the construction of the part, not before. But to answer your question, if you anticipate a scenario where you need to have it move and stay together, that's here where you would, instead of picking the right plane, that's where it would be acceptable to pick the face if that part's going to have to move. And then, I remember your question, Max, what happens when it goes the other way? It's exactly what you think. It then it bumps into itself. So now if we instead move it away from itself, oh shoot, don't do that. If now instead we just apply a negative to this number, so it moves the other way, it just crosses over and makes something like itself. Yeah. It's kind of like a Celtic knot kind of thing. Cool. Any more questions on the tutorial? Yeah, Max. I mean, it's not ideal because you kind of get this weird geometry of how it intersects. And sometimes like you can get weird things happening at points like this. So it's not best practice, but it's not wrong. It may lead to problems. I do want to show you slightly more advanced sweep stuff if there's no more questions on the tutorial. Yeah, Matthew, yeah, please. You're saying how would I move this back to 0? Change it. Yep. Yeah, so if you need to move anything, it's best practice to do it within the master sketch. Move body is kind of a workaround that you can use. It will. So for example, let's say I built this handle, I show my boss, and she says it needs to be smaller, it's too big. I can go to my master sketch now and change this down to 3 inches, and now the handle shrunk. This is the reason why, I don't know if that answers your question. Or again, like there's too much room or not enough room. That's like, if you set it up with anticipation of what you need to change, or maybe it needs to be larger, so make this 1.25 inches. Like, this is how a well-constructed master sketch allows you to like tweak based on the feedback and then the needs of the file. Yeah, no, please, keep on coming. Yeah. Sorry, you remember? Gotcha. The question is when you move a solid, does the sketch move with it? The short answer is if you're using move body, this body move / copy, the sketch does not move with it. Yeah, the sketch in SolidWorks will always be tied to the plane that it exists on. Does that make sense? You can move the plane, yeah. No, you can't move any of the basic planes. The front, top, and right plane are all about the origin. You can't move that. You could create a new plane and you can move that. So again, if you anticipate needing to move that sketch, what I would do is at the very start here, let's say again it's this right plane, you anticipate moving it. You can do that in any number of ways. You can go insert, reference geometry plane, and you can wait for my computer to catch up, and then you can simply just, it's based off of the right plane, that's what's up here, and then it's an offset, so I've moved this plane now 2 inches. Okay, my computer's not happy with me. Now it's 2 inches away from the right plane. So now if I draw a sketch on here, I now have a plane that I can always edit and enter this value to move that plane as needed. Yeah, Max. Yes. So let's say I have this new plane now. I can go down. So okay, here is actually, this is a bit nuanced. Let's see, I think I can do it without. Yeah. So I can right click on my sketch here, and you'll actually see it's already an option. It says edit sketch plane. I can click on this, and because this plane is parallel to it, it should translate it nicely. But I was going to say something weird is going to happen because now the sweep is starting from a different location. Do you see that? Yeah, it's not the center, so now it looks funny. Cool, all good questions. And actually, I'll be honest, I'm surprised that worked. I was expecting there to be an error on that sweep. I think SOLIDWORKS is, every edition it gets better and smarter. Don't be afraid. It'll take, yeah. Okay, any questions on that? All right, I'm gonna jump back to this then. And just talk about some more properties on a sweep. So in general, sweeps, for best practice for sweeps, it's a good idea to have the path intersect with the profile. It is possible to have the path be off of the profile. As we saw, it should still work. It just follows, it follows in relation to the profile. What's a better way to say this? Yeah, so like if it's offset from the profile, like weirder things will happen, right? So let's see if this rebuilds. So like here our profile is nice and big, but now it leads to like a really tight bend through here. So just be aware of that. That's why it's best practice roughly to have the path through the center, okay? You could have it be through an edge. And sometimes if it's a really confusing path for it to follow, sometimes you'll get an error from SOLIDWORKS saying cannot find path start or cannot find path intersection. Again, there was a time when like this totally did not work for a sweep. Again, it's gotten smarter. So when in doubt, it's good to have the profile touching the path in some way, shape, or form. Other times that the sweep will fail is if it cannot successfully, like here, this is really going to challenge the sweep. There we go, we have an error. So what's happening is this circle cannot physically, like, it's too tight. Maybe in like SOLIDWORKS 2020, it will be able to. My computer, for some reason, is... Right. Yeah, I made it angry, yeah. Oh my goodness. So yeah, okay, I'll just show you all. If you have a profile like this, and this is, let's just say this is a value of 1, and you're having this turn on a radius that's tighter than 1, let's say this is 0.5, it's going to fail because you're going to have like a 0 thickness geometry. Does that make, okay, it doesn't make sense. Here, well, let me try this again. Oh, come on, SOLIDWORKS, what's going on today? I'm giving up on SolidWorks and I will show you now. So that we have the video recording. Okay, so I'm going to draw a side view here. So this is a side view of our shape. This is a side view of our shape. Apparently none of my settings are on here, but that's fine. And again, let's say this is a value of 1. If we want it to turn through a value of less than 1, what SolidWorks struggles with is like, as this shape follows along here, all of this crashing into itself, SolidWorks isn't like that. Does that make sense? It leads to like weird geometry. It much more prefers, again, if this is a value of 1, the tightest turn it can make is a radius of 1. Does that make sense? Sometimes it will work, but more often than not, you'll get an error. Like, if this is our object and you're sweeping through here, this should be, if this is the center of your swept path, then you should be okay. Again, it'll sometimes do it. It'll just, yeah, like you said, it'll lead to weird stuff. But this also leads to errors, so try and avoid that. So let's see if we can look at some of this stuff. So again, here's my profile. Exit out of that. So here, let's actually test this out then. Let's give this a value, a diameter of 2, not 22. Okay, 22, that's fine. And then on the right plane, we'll give this sweep. This might actually do it because it's simple enough, but again, it's just best practice to not. All right, but let's see. So if that's 22, is this radius? Yeah, we'll give this a radius of 11. Make this for construction. Again, with your path, it's best if it only has one direction to travel. Sometimes it asks you, I think, which direction it's going to travel. So again, another way to do a sweep is select your path and profile, provided it's clear. So it does do it. Okay. Here, so let's play with this though. Let's see how small we can get this to go. Let's make this 5. So now this represents a quarter. So there you go. At some point it fails. 22. So, okay, so let's try, so it failed at 9. Let's try 10. Yeah, wait, did I do that math wrong? Yeah, okay. So 10 failed. So it can do half of it, roughly. It depends on, yeah, it depends on the shape. Here, let's try 9, but let's also drag this back up. It may work now because it's less of a, again, this is just kind of, you're finding the limits, right? And there is an aspect of SolidWorks of trial and error. It's not ideal, but, and again, it's because it's crashing into itself. That's why it's not happy. Okay, one last thing I want to show you all. So a sweep can go in multiple directions. So a very simple way to show this, and I actually kind of like, there's like other, again, just like any other program, there's multiple paths to the same end goal. But up until this point, I was showing you sweeps with sketches. You can use edges and other things to make sweeps as well. So for example, I can make a dummy body here and apply like 2 big fillets to it. Let's see, this was 22. We said 11 works. Let's see if we can, best practice would be to make it nice and big. I now can use my sweep command. For my path, I can select this. My profile, I can select the circle. For my path, if I right-click on this, I can say Selection Manager, and now it allows me to select multiple things. And now you can see the sweep goes and turns that corner and that edge. So exactly. So you definitely want, under options here, you want to make sure that merged is not checked. And now when I hide this, you can have a handle that steps up and comes around. And that's a very quick way to have an edge and have it come down. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, Alec.
Is there a way to just actually sketch out that line rather than?
Build the solid body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is there a way to get a sweep to do this without having to build a dummy body? And the answer is yes. If I can show you all real quick. The dummy body is a little bit quicker, and it's using things I've already taught you, so that's why I showed that. Right. So there's something, so okay, let's say I put like, fun fact, you can also fill it in a sketch. I haven't showed you all that because it's typically not done, but if I select these two, is that not working? Okay, apparently, there we go. So again, so this is 22. It is right here, sketch fillet, or you can hit F using my hotkeys. So now our sketch has this, but you'll recall that we had a turn, so you have to create a new sketch on this plane. I'm just going to keep this simple with an arc here. Again, best practice would be to have this be tangent, but I'm just trying to show you quickly. So we have two sketches. It may not actually be loaded in here. It is not. So you have to go to Tools, Customize, and actually this one's under Toolbars. It's called Curves. And where did that now appear? Here it is. Oh, maybe it was already loaded. So it's under the Surfaces command, it's Curves. You can do either Composite Curve or Project Curve. Composite Curve is like stitching. Project Curve is like blending. So a Project Curve is going to take this sketch and put it on this curve. So again, if I click Project Curve, again, this is slightly more advanced stuff, but it's an answer to your question. Sketch on sketch. So I can combine this sketch and this one. And do you see how it takes this one and moves it over? If I now click this checkbox, I now have a new profile that this can follow. So I can select this and say sweep, and now that gives me the profile, and now I can select the curve as the path. So that's another way to do that. Yeah, Eminem.
Is building a sketch kind of the same problem as building before finishing the model, or does it not?
The good news with filleting a sketch is it builds in tangency. So it builds in this tangency and this tangency, and it builds in the diameter. I guess it's not a bad thing within the sketch. It's just the reason I didn't introduce it in the model is I would prefer you to do a feature fillet than to have done this in your trace. I don't know. But so short answer, no. It's not like you want to put the sketch fillet towards the bottom. But in general, again, my rule of thumb is that a sketch is for the, if there's an arc in the sketch, it should be for the design, whereas a fillet is a finishing feature. So with this projected curve, can you change it once it's created? The answer is yes. I can come in here. I can move this like this. I believe I can. Now what's tricky here is you'll notice like now this sketch is shorter than this one. So weird things might happen now. We can see what happens. Yeah, do you see that? The reason why it doesn't fully go down now like the first sketch did is because this tapered away before it met this point. Curves are a little bit tricky. Like it's sufficient to know that they exist. So because this sketch stopped short of this one, that's why the handle didn't go all the way down. If I drag this out so that this is now in line with this, and again, this is what for construction and guide curves are for. I'm just being kind of sloppy to show things. But if I like select this point and this point, holding down Control and say coincident, now it aligns it. Oh, it doesn't like it. Yeah, something weird is going on. My guess is that because there's this long line on here, let's give this an angle. Let's see what that does. Now that should work. But again, weird things start happening, yeah. It will, because now you'll see this is pointing to it. It's part of the Jenga tower. It's relying on this curve. If I delete that, it will fail. One other thing I forgot to mention. Let me simplify this. So I'm going to delete this out. Well, it's a compound curve. It's curving both down and to the right. That's why we needed the projected line. Or like I showed you before with an edge. You could, yeah, you can build on different, there's many different paths to the same end result. So yeah, you can stack lines onto each other on different planes. That would work as well.
But you cannot modify the same line in different planes.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the projected curve is to get a compound curve on there. It's curving in two directions, not just one direction. And then Max asked a good question. There is such a thing as 3D sketches. So that's another thing you can do. That is under here, this drop-down menu, 3D sketch. And then you can sketch literally in 3 dimensions. So you can have a line that starts here and goes like down and away. Again, 3D sketches are kind of tricky. I would avoid using them for now. I'll try and see if we can think of an instance where it makes sense. That's my advice, is what I did the first time. Like I just use a body as a reference to like select edges for it to follow. It's kind of a quick way, and you all know how to do extrudes and fillets, and that's why I showed you that way first, if you want to have a complex sweep. Let me just show you one last thing on sweeps, and then you can start on the tutorial. The direction at which the profile meets the path is important. So now, okay, before it met perpendicular. So for now, let's ignore this sketch. So do you see now how here's our profile, here's our path. Do you see how it meets not perpendicular? It's coming off at an angle. If I now sweep these two together, so again, another way to do the sweep is select both and click on this. It kind of leads to a weird shape. Let's see if I can exaggerate this more. It happened on some of those errors. I forgot to point it out. I should have. You'll see, can you see the profile of this? It's like an ellipse, right? If I now like take a top plane and cut this perpendicular to it, you can cut with a thin line if you pick through all both as your option. Do you see it's swept an ellipse instead of a circle? So that's the other property of the sweep, is you want it to start perpendicular to the profile. All right, so yeah, to just recap, the importance of a sweep. It's made up of two things. It's made up of a profile and a path. Ideally, you want the path to intersect the profile, ideally in center or somewhere on the edge. And you want the path to start perpendicular to the profile. Is that clear? Those are kind of like the main takeaways. I probably should have started with that, but it's now at the end of the video. Yay. Cool. Any other questions on sweeps? Yeah. We will learn lofts, yeah. Hopefully with time.